What's up, guys? We got Shante Lambert on the podcast today. This one is awesome. It's got something for everyone. We've known her since the beginning. She is married to Randy Lambert, who was on the pod recently as well. And they were involved with Spectora basically from the first 10 customers. So lots of fun stories, and you can tell her and I know each other well. But we talk a lot about balancing work and motherhood. We talk about kind of the guilt associated with that, a lot of deeper topics. But then we also talk about hiring a growth leader and being a leader, being a boss, managing employees, things of that nature as a multi-inspector company. So just a fun all-around conversation. And we talk about how to turn off work at home for those of you that work with a spouse. I think it's a very important skill that we touch on here at the end. So I think you're going to enjoy the conversation with Shante. All right, well, we're rolling. This is a first ever on Spectora to have a husband and wife on separately. So thank you for being down with this experiment. For those listening, it's not released yet. At the time I publish this, it'll be out, but we had Randy Lambert on a few weeks ago, and I'm going to get that published soon. And you are
Shante Lambert. Yeah, sorry.
Lambert Home Inspections. And obviously you're a huge piece to the business, but I thought it would be fun to just like let each of you get your airtime, because sometimes when we do have a couple on, you could tell the other one kind of just sits back and lets the other one talk, or vice versa. And they have plenty to say, but they try to be respectful of each other. So thanks for doing this. Did he say how it went? Did he give you the debrief?
He did not give me too much information, but he told me going into this that he hopes mine is going to be better than his, which
that's sweet. That's nice of him.
Yeah, he doesn't think that it went very well. So, but this is my first podcast, but I've been pushing him into them a lot lately. So he hates it.
That's why I knew I had to get to you to get him on the pod, because you're the brains of the operation, clearly. And you pushed him out of his comfort zone. And so I think he presents great. He's got a wealth of knowledge. Sometimes inspectors don't always lean into how much they know and let themselves kind of go on a pod. Sometimes it's they think they have to be like straight laced and professional. And I'm like, no, dude, got to curse at least once. You got to spice it up.
Well, Randy's going to do that. So people that know him know that he's going to.
Yeah. So let's just jump into kind of your history with the company and kind of like your side of it, because I think it doesn't get talked about enough, honestly. Which typically the female spouse backbone of the company, it's typically found out later, like, oh my God, you do all of that. Like, oh my God, you make this run. And I just kind of want to hear your kind of, if we can rewind to when, basically we all first met many years ago, how you got into working into the business.
God, that was so long ago. I met you in Vegas, I think, for the first time. And we were at, I forgot what conference it was. But I want to say that was 2017, 2018 time. Yep. And we had just started the business back in 2017. And I was just attending as a spouse. So I was just there for fun and then to meet the different vendors and everything. And so I wasn't really working in the business at that point. I think I was still teaching.
Did you have any impressions of the home inspector business? What did you think of it going in? And then I can imagine what a conference, let alone in Vegas,
I know
someone coming in is thinking.
It was, there were a lot of older men, there weren't a lot of wives. There weren't a lot of women there. I think I was maybe there was a handful of us, and it was very technical. Like they had the technical classes, and then they had more of the classes for, just kind of giving you information about the inspection industry. But I realized we were like the youngest people there. We probably looked like babies because I think we were in God, I don't even know how old we were at that time. Early 30s, maybe.
Which is a baby in the industry, of course.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So we looked like children walking in, like, oh, why are you guys here? We definitely had fun because it was Vegas, and that's like our place to escape. So it was great. It was just, I didn't feel like I had a place in it, if that makes sense.
Oh, makes total sense.
Yeah. At home, I did. When I was working with Randy, when I started to work in the business full time. But at the conferences, I didn't really feel like I belonged in a sense, just because I was a woman and
Sure.
young.
Which is still a thing, I think, in the industry. We're all, we're fighting. IEB's done great with it, with having kind of the
Hmm.
women's groups, certain like breakouts that speak to that side of the business, and then also kind of elbowing your way into a male dominated
Yeah.
business. Okay, so you go to that conference. Is that what sparked the interest, or was it more Randy saying like, I
Um,
need your help and your brains to turn this?
yeah. So teaching was great. I was doing special education, severe disabilities teacher. That's really like my passion, but it was a really toxic environment and it wasn't serving me at all. So I just wasn't happy in it. And I had only been in it, I think that was my second year of teaching. And I was like, this is just not working. And Randy needed help. We were getting busier, and we had another inspector working with him, and they were like a two-man team, which was great. And so we really just needed me in the office. So I left teaching after that school year and took my summer because, I deserved it.
You
And
deserve,
then,
you earned that.
yeah. And then I came in full time in August of 2018, I want to say.
Mhm.
Um, Maybe 2019. I don't remember. Time is like blurring at
Yeah.
this point. But yeah, so I came in full time, took over admin, but we weren't obviously where we are now. And so it was way more lax. And it would be like, oh, hey, I have to go do this. And then I'm going to answer the phones and do all this at the same time. My mindset wasn't growth. My mindset wasn't, yeah, it was just answering the phones and scheduling.
Just support and fill in where you felt like it needed, right?
Yeah, exactly. Realtor relations, all that.
How was the learning curve in terms of whether it be the nuance, the industry, the language, the software, like how was all that?
That was difficult. The software was great. I mean, we've been Spectora users from the beginning, but I mean, you and Randy met when you both kind of started. So that's really cool. And so we started out with you guys. And so that was fairly easy in terms of learning the software because I am just more technologically savvy
Sure.
in terms of Randy and I. But the learning the technicalities of everything with inspecting, I didn't know it. So typically, if somebody would have a question, I would be like, oh, let me take that information down. And then once Randy's done with an inspection, I'll have him give you a call back. Um, and I just really wasn't well versed in that. I was great in talking with realtors and scheduling, but the technical side, it was really something that I've had to learn. And I still don't know, I don't know, 20, I maybe know like 15, 25% of what I could know, but that's just very technical.
Yeah. And that's hopefully not even expected for most, support admin roles. So when did the switch flip and kind of you started taking more ownership of the business and like thinking about growth? Like when did I, because 2019 to where you guys are now, I know a lot happened in the world, but
And
when did
quick.
that switch flip and kind of what was that like for you in terms of being all in and kind of being like, no, like I'm treating this like it's mine?
Yeah. So I didn't really start looking at things as an owner until recently, because I left the business after I had our son in 2019. It just was too difficult to balance the two. And then the market really flipped after 2020 was fantastic for home inspections. Randy was busy all the time, not so great for be having an infant, but it was great for the business.
Right.
Um, but so I left, and then since the market had changed and he grew really fast the during the time that I was out of it. And so a lot of what we were bringing in was going to all of our employees. And so at that point I was like, well, I need to bring in some supplemental income. So I went back to teaching.
Hmm.
I went back to a school, and it wasn't great again. And so Randy and I talked, and I came back in March of this year of 2023. And I realized that I was helping the business accelerate. And I was working Randy like a dog. He kept telling me, he was like, I am so busy. And I was like, sorry, everything's coming in. So I'm just gonna, put you guys on the schedule. They were slammed. And so I just was like, well, you got to do what you got to do. And I think I just at that point really started taking ownership of it and saying, I always say, like, I'm an owner by proxy because Randy's technically the owner and I'm just his wife. But, I once I started to treat it as though I was the owner alongside of him, it just changed a
I
ton.
want, yeah, let's dive into that because, well, first of all, was there a debate, a discussion? Did he have to convince you when you went back to teaching the second time to get back involved in the business earlier this year? Like, what was that deliberation like? Because I assume you went to teaching for a reason as opposed to like getting back into the business.
Yeah. It wasn't the right time for me to come back into the business. We also had somebody that was in my role,
Oh,
essentially,
right,
who's like
right.
the client care coordinator. And so it just wasn't the right time, and we knew that I wasn't going to really be bringing anything extra in to help. um, but leaving teaching had to happen, um, just kind of with the climate and everything. And my school was a little bit, we had a lot of lockdowns. And so for me, I just didn't feel safe. And so timing honestly just worked out perfectly. We didn't really have this long discussion about it. Our client care coordinator just wasn't working out at the time. And then everything with the school was a little bit dangerous. So it just kind of all shifted together at the same time. And it was perfect. So that
That's
was really
awesome.
great.
I
Yeah.
love that. What can you speak a little to? I think the that doesn't get talked about enough. Again, the plight of working moms and the balance getting back into the business. Like, if you can even just give us a perspective on how you think about it, how you thought about it when you got back
Mhm.
involved earlier this year, and the things that maybe like people don't talk about enough.
Yeah. It's definitely not easy, but I will say being able to work from home and with my husband, it allows for a little bit more flexibility as a mom, which has been great. I was having to get up, rush out the door, get Lane dressed and ready, and to school by like 6:45 in the morning. Yeah, and then working and everything. And so now, once I got back into the business, we were able to sleep in a little bit. So he was a little bit happier. He was getting a little bit more time with the both of us. But we were so busy when I came back. And I mean, we just month over month were doing better than we had ever done. So it was a really great year for us. And that was really hard because I was always on the phone. I was always texting. And so I felt bad. Like, that mom guilt that's just inherently there. I was like, I'm not spending enough time with him. And so I felt like I was a stay at home mom and a working mom at the same time, even though he was in school, at preschool full time.
Right.
So we really had to find that balance. And then that's when we decided to bring on a virtual assistant, which was such a huge help.
Oh, really? Yeah, well,
Mhm.
let's talk about the guilt for a second. And this
Yeah.
resonates with me because through the like early explosive growth years of Spectora, it's like when my daughter was spending time with me and my wife, and it was like I felt like I couldn't be present part of the time. And there's like a forgiving that like almost has to happen of like I had to prioritize and do the best I
Yeah.
could. And I know sometimes that pile of guilt on moms can be like twofold, threefold, fivefold. So like how did you
Yeah.
deal with that and kind of like how did you kind of rectify it internally?
Yeah. So for me personally, with the guilt and everything, this year I focused a lot on myself. So with me leaving teaching, I felt like it was a very selfish choice because I'm the person who's always done things for everybody else. And Randy's always scolded me the whole time that we've been together. He's like, you always do these things for everybody, and nobody, gives those things back to you. And I'm like, it's fine, it's fine. Even though inside I'm dying. And so
Right, right.
yeah,
But
and
you're
it's
I mean, you're kind of taught to put on the
yeah,
face, right? And be happy and kind of
exactly.
please people.
And you just do it no matter what. And so this year was kind of like my year for me and focusing on like what's going to work for me and make me happy. And so I went to therapy, which has been fantastic. And it's really helped me to look at what is important and prioritize those things and realize that one thing that I learned is that you only have 100% to give.
Mhm.
Like you can't give 100% to the business, you can't give 100% to your kid, you can't give 100% to your husband. and expect to be thriving. It's just not going to work. So if you're giving 50% here, 25% here, there's this balance that you really have to find. And so I think giving myself grace in that aspect, and just, I have to have the forethought constantly. And I tell myself all the time, hey, this is okay. Or, hey, it's fine that didn't work out, and it's going to be okay. And so being able to do that has allowed me to be better in this role and to be a better mom. And then also to lean on Randy a little bit more, because I always felt like I had to do it all as a mom. And so once I was like, I had to be better at just saying, hey, I need you to do this. Kind of like with work, when I'm like, hey, I need you to take this inspection. And so,
Yes.
yeah, having that balance has been key. And so that's really just helped it even out, because we didn't have that before.
I love this so much. I think it's an amazing thank you for sharing that. And it's like almost a PSA in a sense for like
Mhm.
humans in general, but also women in businesses to like delegate more and feel okay
Yeah.
doing it, because typically, um, Brandy can handle a little more. It's fine, because if some of the momming duties and the parenting duties do shift more to the female, I think it's probably underutilized. So for and I'm sure plenty of women in the business will be watching this. It's a great way of sharing that. And then the VA thing. So
Yeah.
you guys made a move to hire a VA. Talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah, she's fantastic. She's been with us since May. Funny enough, she started, I want to say, the week before we left to go to Unite in Texas for
Hmm.
IEB. And we were very busy. And so I like made as many Loom videos as I could to like train her on all the things. But I hired her outright because we know a property manager in our area that we work closely with who has a whole like team of VAs. And so she was able to send us a few resumes of people that she could get us in contact with. So we didn't go through a staffing
Hmm.
agency. Um, and so that was a little bit different, but I've had to learn how to become like somewhat of a manager in a sense.
Sure.
I've never managed many people. The only people I've managed are children, and then maybe like an assistant in my classroom. So it's a little bit different, really kind of taking that responsibility, and just making sure that she's up to par. And I also realized that I should not hire for a business on the regular, because I go off of feeling and I'm like, wow, we really get along. I could be your friend. You should work for me. Sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. This one worked really well. The second VA that I hired, not so much, because I wasn't hiring for the right reasons.
Mm,
And so, but Christine, she's my current VA, and has helped take so much off my plate. Um, and that's been so great. Like, it's just been
amazing. What types of things to give people kind of? I don't think people understand the full scope of how great VAs are, and especially
yeah.
I've heard from the Philippines, especially ones
Yes.
that are really crushing it. So like, what? Just a few things that you're able to share of like what she takes off your plate.
Yeah, so she is in the Philippines, and we've kind of gotten her now to answering all of the phone calls. I really had to have a lot of conversations with like loosening up and like relaxing, because that's just how we go about things here in our business. So when people call, I want it to be professional, but I also want them to feel comfortable from the very beginning, because then they let down their walls and then they're like, oh, this is great. You
Yeah.
guys might be more expensive, but you're great. So I'm going to hire you.
Yeah.
So just kind of working on like that, and also learning the culture a little bit more, because she was like, we don't do that here.
Right.
So,
Right. Yeah. It's not part of the
um,
culture. I think you and I both have some
exactly.
insight too, because we're both part
Yes.
Filipino. So it's like
Mhm.
there's insight
Very
there.
strict, very rigid.
Yeah. Yeah.
Don't give a lot away. But she's done a really good job of doing that. So she answers the phones when radon um, reports come in. We, kind of handle the emailing them out,
Hmm.
just making sure that everybody's kind of on top of things. So she's just really taken on a lot of those administrative duties, so that now I can come in and start putting together, you know, SOPs and all of that boring stuff for the company that every company has to have. So she's been great.
That's great. And I always thought your superpower, I told you this years ago, was just like your ability to connect with people, to be personable, be light, make people feel heard.
Yeah.
Amazing, like on the
Thank you for
service
that.
and growth side. And so then I was like, it's a disservice if you're not out shaking hands, meeting people, presenting,
Yeah.
just like relating to people. Did that free up your time a little to do that? Or even
A
social,
little
over
bit.
social, it could be done too. That's the beauty of social media
Yeah.
nowadays.
Social media has been, I've been running social media even during the time that I was out of the business. I was running the social media, which was a little bit difficult. But now that I'm back in it, I can focus on it a little bit more. And so having her really helps free up that time so that I can do that. She also will help me create a few things so that I can just put it out there and just get it done
Mm,
on a faster turnaround
right.
time. But we have our growth coordinator who's fantastic also, and she is me, but like I always tell people, she's me, but like 50 to 75% more bubbly than I am. So you can imagine
Yeah.
Randy loves when we have a meeting together.
She's crushing it for you guys though, right? I mean, she's
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 been
doing well.
fantastic. Yeah. And she's really made a name for herself in our area
Hmm.
as our growth coordinator and somebody that works for us and promotes us. So, like online, when people are suggesting home inspectors, they'll say her name, like they'll tag her
Really?
name. Yeah, with Lambert Home Inspections because they really know her and
She's
have
out there.
connected. So she's been fantastic. So we're kind of tag teaming together sometimes. I'll go to some events and for the events that Randy doesn't want to go to, that I like really am into. Like we did this fancy event in DC for like a luxury magazine. And I was like, oh, let's go to that. So Stacy and I went and we had a great time and got to, mingle with some agents. But yeah, so I like to be on the phone though. So I don't like to be answering all the time, but I think that there's something to be said when you get me versus, an
Sure.
assistant.
Sure. There's
Yeah.
like an extra level of, connection to the business, which makes sense.
Yeah.
Um, so the growth coordinator, she's out going to brokerages, getting coffee. She's kind of
Oh yeah.
doing the growth activities, right? Was that a leap for you guys to hire a growth coordinator? I know it's an IEB thing. That's something that IEB
Yeah.
pushes. Was that?
Yeah. At
Yeah.
the time, we had a decent amount of employees because she came on, I want to say right at the beginning of 2021. And so that's when the
Mhm.
market shifted. Um, and so, but it was great because she was out there even when people weren't being able to get home inspections. She was out there so that when they were, they thought of her.
Yeah.
Um, And so I think it was definitely a leap financially for him to hire her at that time. But she's been so essential to the business and the growth of the business that it was worth it.
Yeah.
And then at that time, our business really we kind of really went down in size because we started to focus a lot on culture of
Mhm.
the company, which I think has also been a huge turnaround for the company. Um, and so she's out there doing all the things. Like I can't even keep track of her networking schedule. We tried, and Randy and I were like, what are your networking groups? I think she's got at least 15 to 20 networking groups
That she's
that
actively in. Yeah.
every single week. And she's got her schedule. And so that just really helps to be top of mind with people. And so she kind of brings me along sometimes and she'll introduce me because she's better at that. She loves cold calling. So she's good at just like, hi, I'm Stacy. And I'm like, hi, I'm Shante.
That's
I own
huge though.
it.
Yeah, that's so what do you think is some of the keys to hiring? Like what should people be looking for if they're like, "Man, I need me a growth coordinator. That sounds
Yeah.
amazing."
It's such a hard role to nail down. We saw her resume when it came through, and I was like, she is the person. She's the one. She had experience in sales
Okay.
in orthodontics. And
Mhm.
so she had those skills to do the networking, popping into offices, all of that. She had that personality. But you have to have somebody that's a go getter. And that is, not just going to be complacent and say, I'm going to make my calls. I'm going to do this. But I think from the business owner standpoint, you have to offer them something that's going to want to push them to be better or to do better. So we had to look at changing things for her, pay wise, and say, okay, well, this is not really pushing you enough. So what are those things that we can do on our end to give you that push to get more business? And I think that switch really helped. And so now she attends things like happy hours in the evenings if it works with her schedule. And it's nice because her schedule, she can dictate it as long as she's doing the things that she needs to do. And it allows her time to spend with her kids and go to all of her things. So there's a freedom in it as long as they're a go-getter. And I think that's
Sure.
the biggest thing. Yeah.
Is it kind of similar to like sales commission in terms of how they get paid,
Yeah,
where it's like, hey, what you bring in, you get a piece of. So it's like in theory
exactly.
uncapped, right?
Yeah, but it was really hard because I'm pretty sure, and I don't know if it was the IEB model or what specifically, but she has a base pay,
Mhm.
and her commission, in the beginning, I believe, was supposed to be based off of kind of what she brought in for that month in terms of her agents.
Right.
But it was really difficult because the market shifted. And so we weren't getting a lot of inspections,
Right.
even though she was out there hustling. And so because nobody wanted home
Right.
inspections at that time. And so it was like, well, you're doing the work, but you're not reaping the benefits from it because the market is not allowing it. And so
It's tough.
Randy really had to adjust it and look at, okay, this is what we can do. And at that time, it was really hard. I mean, I know for us financially, a lot of what we were bringing in was going directly to our employees. So what we were taking from the business was solely to pay bills, just to pay bills, to
Right.
get us by. I was on a teacher's salary, so we know that that's not
Right.
that.
Right. We know we underpay teachers here. Yeah.
Yeah, so we were paying for daycare. But so we had to take that leap and just to keep her,
Right.
because she's worth it. And I think if you know the value of your employees and how worth it they are to your success, then you're willing to make it happen as a business owner, no matter what.
Right.
Um, yeah.
I like that. We can riff on this for a second because it sounds like
Yeah.
you guys were intentional about who to make a personal sacrifice for. Because I
Mhm.
hear lots of business owners out there that blindly make that sacrifice out of their own pocket, out of some need to like take care of everybody, or whether it's one person, but like a growth person sounds like absolutely one, especially a great growth person
Yeah.
to bridge a gap for, because I know some inspectors need to ascribe to the pay yourself first kind of mentality, and I think
Mhm.
like that everyone goes on their journey, I think, of like plow
Yeah.
everything back into the business. But if you feel that lack, or if you feel like you're just scraping by, that can be a tough space to permanently be in as a business owner.
Yeah. It was hard. It was very hard at that time. I mean, we were getting by and we were paying our bills, and the biggest thing was just making sure we had a roof over our heads, but then also that our employees were also taken care of, because we know that in our position, they have families too.
Right.
And so we it was a blessing in disguise that we downsized as much as we did, even though at the time it sucked. Like
Yeah.
when you're in those moments, you're just like, this is awful. And I'm the person who takes things so personally that it hurts me,
Yeah.
like, to the core when things just don't seem to work out the way that you hope that they do. And so, but now looking at the big picture, we were able to then really hone in on what is important to us, what do we want, and who do we want to be surrounded by. And I know that Randy has really taken that into effect when he hires. And so now it's not just like hiring out of need, it's hiring with intentionality, which I think is really important. And that shift has made a world of a difference. I mean, he talked to one of our inspectors for months before hiring him.
Really.
Hmm. And he's been a great hire.
What else? Yeah. Let's talk about culture for a bit, because
Yeah.
it was funny at the last conference. Me, you, and Randy were talking. He was giving us some pointers on how to give like tougher feedback to people, because we both need help on that. I guess on the
Hmm.
flip side, I could see him being very good at hiring too. I'm in your boat where like I could talk myself in or out of any hire because I'm just like, oh
Yep.
yeah, they're nice, they're a good culture fit. It's like no,
We
that's
get
not
along well.
culture fit. How does he and how do you guys now view culture fit as you're building back up? Because like you said, you guys
Mhm.
downsized a little and now you're intentionally growing again.
Yeah.
How do you view culture? Because I don't think a lot of inspection companies even like intentionally think about this when hiring. They just do it out of survival, like you said, where it's like,
Hmm.
we're busy. We need a
Yeah,
guy.
exactly. And we did that, and it was great, but it just really wasn't pushing us to the next level. And so with culture, um and having the right culture in your company, I think for us it's just really uh, we were in a conference and somebody was speaking, and he said something along the lines of like, you have to do a test of like, would you get a beer with them, like would you go and have a drink with this person
Mhm.
that you want to hire and enjoy your time with them. And which is very just basic and simple, but it's so true because on our off time we're spending time with the people that we actually want to hang out with, not who we are supposed to. And so we've kind of taken that into effect with our hires. And it's nice because for our company, and I don't know if this is how we should be kind of running our business, but I almost feel like every person is almost a family member in that sense. But we get along with their spouses or their significant others. And like, we're going on like a tubing trip with for the weekend with one of our employees, and doing something else with another one. We just did a gift exchange with Stacy and her kids at her house and had dinner. And so like that to me, and feeling like the family aspect of it, you just feel comfortable to be who you are, which I think allows for more transparency. Or at least it has for us. And it's been really just a huge shift. And I don't think I think being in the company now is much better than it would have been for me if I was fully in it a few years ago. That
Yeah.
makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah. Caters more to, I think, your strengths and kind of like personality traits that I think make people feel welcome and warm, but
Yeah.
also, accountable.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's allowed for Randy to also like, he's learned how to be a leader. And I think as his wife, that's probably one of like I don't know, like the most exciting things that I've seen from him in his time as a business owner and having employees is that he went about it in the beginning as like somebody's boss.
Mm,
And being somebody's boss is so different than being somebody's like a leader. And to learn the difference in that is huge because you have to have certain traits and abilities to be a leader. And he always had it in him, but he just needed to be pushed. And so to see that change, that's also allowed for a change within our company and the people that we hire. And so it's just a shift overall, which is fantastic.
that that was one of the like proudest, coolest things to hear at the last conference was us just chatting about all that and like
Um,
what he gave me an example when we were there. What's one of the most like outstanding examples you've seen in terms of like where you're like, well, Randy 3 years ago wouldn't have done that.
mm-hmm.
Like, what's a good example
Oh,
of
sorry.
leader versus boss mentality?
Yeah. It's actually funny enough, it would be active listening probably, which is it sounds like such a simple thing, but it's not. I mean, in college, I had a class specifically on how to actively listen, and it's a skill that you really have to work on. Um, but I used to, as when I was a stay at home mom, and I'd kind of be in the kitchen with Lane during their team meetings. And in my mind, I'd be like, wow, he's talking a lot. And if I was an employee, I would be like, when is this going to be over? Because he had his agenda and he just really was like, boom, boom, boom. This is what's happening. Constant talking. And now he makes space for people's questions, people's comments, and asks them, like, what are your ideas? Or what do you think we can do better? Or what do you need help with? and what can I do to serve you as your, employer. And that right there is a huge shift. And he also lets me lead the meetings, and he just chimes in when he needs to. And that is huge. So
I
that's
love that.
a change.
One thing he highlighted when we were talking to was like, and I think this has always come naturally to you, having known you and just like your background and like as a teacher, it's like, yeah, you have to get buy-in sometimes, especially if they are children, or you have to ask questions and listen. When he like led with questions as opposed to coming into a meeting, and it's like, it was a good reminder for me too of like not coming in and steamrolling, like, because sometimes as a leader it gets confusing of like you need to have all the answers when we don't.
Hmm.
When it's almost the opposite, in fact, is like help
Yeah.
other people arrive at answers. So um love hearing that. How has
Yeah.
your leadership changed over time?
Ooh. I'm still learning. Because recently I've had some struggles in being a leader and knowing, okay, is this person the right fit? Is this person not the right fit?
So hard.
It's so hard because I could be so like, no, this is not happening. This is not going well. We just can't have this. And then we have a meeting and we talk about it. And I'm like, everything is great. You are awesome. I am so happy you hear me. You're gonna stay on board,
So relatable. So
Oh,
relatable.
it's so hard. Stacy, she's had to, I mean, gosh, I should pay her for as much as she listens to me, where I'm like, I just don't know. But then we had this meeting and it was so great. And then the next day I'm like, well, that person just pissed me off and that's not gonna work. Yeah. So Randy was like, you have to learn. And he saw me kind of going through what he went through in the beginning and just really knowing when it wasn't working out. Um, and he had said something to me in the kitchen. He was like, well, you're going to get through this. And I was like, not if I die first, because my brain can't take it. Um, and so he's really kind of helped me learn that, like, just kind of learn to trust my instincts. Um, I'm really bad about that because you might be the same way as me, but you make a choice and then you're like, oh, but I don't know. Oh, but what about this? Oh, and you're just bringing in all these factors that maybe don't matter
Yeah.
because you don't want to hurt their feelings. I'm big on that. I hate hurting people's feelings. I hate confrontation. But I've learned that being in a leadership role, if I don't address it when it bothers me or there's an issue, I'm going to bottle it up and it's all going to get stuffed down and then I'm going to explode and then I'm going to sound very unprofessional. And then I have to say sorry after. So I'm just learning to really say, this is how you need to fix it and be more constructive with it versus just, just next time, if you could just do this, that would be great.
That is, yes, the watered down, if it wouldn't be an inconvenience for you,
Oh,
and
yeah,
if you could do your job that you're getting paid for, it's
exactly.
something I think a lot of leaders struggle with.
Mhm.
It's like an emotional roller coaster managing people. It really is.
Yeah, I'm sure I feel like you and I are very similar in those
Yes.
aspects.
I
And
like to
so,
be
yeah,
liked, and sometimes as a
yes.
leader, liking to be liked just does not work. Which is fascinating though. That's why I love IEB so much, because so many of
Mhm.
the exercises make you look in the mirror and ask, why do I need to be liked? Let me dig into that. Like what
Yeah,
happened when I was 8 to 10 years old that, makes
I
me
know.
feel like I need to have everyone's approval. Do I have mommy issues? All this stuff. Where it's like,
I think you and I talked about that,
yeah.
but it is so true though. And I think that exercise at the mastermind, and it was more about self-awareness,
Yeah.
because I think the more self-aware that you are as an individual, the better that you can be for other people, which is, I mean, we should know that, but at the same time, we all think we're self-aware,
Yeah.
but
Remember that stat when they said
yeah.
in a poll, like 85 or 90% of people raise their hand that they're self-aware. And
Mhm.
in reality, I think it was 10 to 15%
Yeah.
actually are.
Yeah. I
We all looked
definitely
around
was
the
like,
room.
I'm
Yeah.
self-aware. And then he said that, and I was like, maybe I'm not.
Maybe I'm not. Yeah. Yeah.
I can pull that back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a scale. Sometimes we are, sometimes we're not.
Uh-huh.
One thing I want to make sure we get into is the spouse dynamic, because that's
Oh
part of
yeah.
why this interview is so interesting, and why
Hmm.
doing them separately so everyone can speak freely on the topic too
Yes.
is important. What has that been like? Is it something you ever imagined you and Randy would do? And then we'll get into some of the pros and
Yeah.
cons.
I never thought that we would do it because we are both very different people. Like for the people that have met us and know us, we are 1,000 times different. There are similarities to us, but he is very, like he knows what he wants. He's very systematic
Yeah.
about the way he does things. Whereas I'm very much like, I'm going to change it up every day. And our career paths that we were going down were very different. He was a building engineer. He knew what he was doing. He didn't go to college, but he did his classes that he needed for that role. And he just did what was right for him in that moment. And he always knew what he was going to do. And then there's me, I could change my job every single week and it would be fine. Um, so working together really never crossed my mind. And then when I joined the business back in 2018, it was great, but I don't think we were ready for it.
Mm,
Um, Emotionally, personally, like just within ourselves, because he was growing this. Well, he wasn't really growing it. He was doing the job and he wasn't really looking at growth. And so I was just kind of there to help. And, when you're husband and wife team, you bring in whatever you're dealing with outside of work into work. And he would always be like, would you talk to your boss like that? Like, no, but you're my boss, so I don't care.
uh,
Yeah. And so now it's a much different, I mean, granted, we do still have our moments that I'm pretty sure everybody does. Especially if you're having a bad day or week. Um, but I think we're more well equipped now to work together than we were when I started back in 2018. It's just we have the same goals now. And I think being on the same page with our goals has really improved our working relationship
mm,
because we know what we're working towards and also staying in our own respective lanes. I think that's very important. And we're still learning that. I'm like, oh, that's services. You got to handle that. And he could be like, no, that's operations.
did you guys like intentionally define them, like lay it out in a document, or was it more of a discussion? Like, what does that look like?
We have not laid it out in a document. We probably should. But it's just kind of, we have had discussions and I'm like, okay, well, if this problem arises, that has to be services,
Mhm.
but if this happens, then that's operations.
Yep.
Um, and then I'm kind of still within the growth realm too, just because I talk with Stacy all the time and we're always bouncing ideas off each other. And so just knowing kind of where those lanes are, trying not to cross over. Um, but we've had to have candid talks and saying, like, hey, this is not working, or hey, this is how I feel. Like one time I told him, I said, you should change my title from director of operations to Lambert Home Inspection's mom, because I feel like everybody's mom. Just making sure everybody was always in the right place at the right time and knew what they were supposed to be doing.
Right.
And so for that, I had to say, okay, well, you have to take over this because that's solely services. And
Yeah.
I can't do that and do my job well. And so having those clear definitions, but then also having this is what we're working towards, and this is what we want for our life together, married, and for our child, and for what we foresee for ourselves in our future. Now that we kind of have those mapped out, now we're constantly working towards that. So even if we're butting heads, we know we're still working towards that goal. So
That's
it helps a
huge.
lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That you said that really well. Well said. Because I think attacking the problem or the solution as opposed to the person is kind of like something we try to focus on here. We're like, attack the problem
Yeah.
and solution, not the person. But we all know when you're married to someone, though, things can be said with a tone in which it could
Oh
be
yeah.
taken improperly. So I can only imagine something like, we need to grow more. We need to service our clients better, coming off
Yeah.
in a not
Oh
so great
yeah.
way.
I think the team can tell when we're off too.
Oh yeah. It's like kids. It's like
Oh,
kids and parents of knowing when.
it's terrible. We went into a meeting a couple months ago and I was like, everybody's going to know that we're pissed off at each other. Like, they're just going to know. And having them there as a buffer, sometimes it helps. And it kind of helps to, remove the tension and really focus on, and know, kind of get back to what we're supposed to be focusing on. But they can tell. And they're like, okay, mom and dad, I'm going to need you guys to relax.
Business mommy and daddy are fighting because they just said
Exactly.
passive aggressive stuff in a meeting. Like Mike and I fight the same thing. It's like over the
Oh, it's
years,
great.
there's been meetings where I'm like, wow, that was really immature of us to speak like in code through the team. It's like that shit won't fly.
And everybody knew.
Everybody knew.
Everybody knew the
They all
whole
know.
time. They're
They
like
all know.
talking about it after,
Yeah,
messaging each
daddy
other.
and daddy were fighting that day, so it's fine.
Well, that makes me feel better over here.
100%. It's almost impossible, I think, when it's a brother, sister, spouse to inject some of that in.
Yeah.
How do you guys turn it off? How do you not talk about Lambert home
Mm,
inspections?
we're not good at that. I will say that.
Fair enough.
Yeah, we have started to, one thing that like we are really working on for this year is having kind of like set date nights or set game nights or family movie nights or this or that we put on the calendar so we know these are specifically for these times. Um, Having the VA has helped with taking things off of our plate in the evening. So
Mm,
that's been a huge help because she's usually on in our after hours. So she's on until 8 p.m. And so that really helps to where we're not having to work and do all of that while being at home. But sometimes if we're having a drink, just relaxing, watching TV, we'll start talking about it. And it's like, but it's really relaxed and, nothing like, oh my gosh, we need to write this down. And
right.
we have to implement this right now. Just ideas kind of flowing back and forth. Sometimes when you're a little bit looser and you have a drink and things like that, ideas kind of ebb and flow a little bit better.
That's a good
Yeah,
point.
without thinking too much into it, or at least they do for us. And so, here and there, but we're not good at it. It's always happening.
I do like that distinction though between kind of the free flowing where vision casting brainstorming versus operationalized talk. And I think
Yeah,
I've heard some couples say like we're in bed literally talking about the next day and I'm like that's a recipe for sleeping like crap.
exactly.
Versus the
Just kind of like talking about our dreams. Like we're like, oh
yeah,
wow, like if we can do these things, then that's going to create financial freedom for us to then travel the world like we want to do, or bring Lane to all these cool places. And
yeah,
yeah, and so that's kind of how we talk about it, is like, if we do these things, then this could be our life.
yeah.
And that's really what we want. So
I like
yeah.
that. And I think that's the flip side too, though. I think a lot of people talk as if when you're involved in a business or, whether it's two entrepreneurs like me and my wife or two people in a business, it's also not a dirty thing to talk about it off hours because it
Yeah.
means you care. Like
Yes.
I also don't want people to feel bad of being like, you give a shit, you're excited. Yeah. Talk about things you're excited about. It's to me when there's no other joy in other places because all we talk about is,
Yeah.
how many inspections are on the calendar for next week or whatever.
Exactly. And it is hard. We've had to, like, I bought us a game, because sometimes you realize all you do is talk about business, or all you do is talk about your kid, or there's nothing else. And you're like, wow, is there
Mm,
anything else going on in our lives that we should talk about?
right.
And so I really like the Real Housewives, which I'm sure the other home inspectors listening to this are not going to really be into. But they have been doing this thing where when they go to dinner, sometimes they like will pull out these cards and like ask questions and it go around the table and everybody gives like an answer. And I was like, that's a really great idea.
Yeah.
So I found this couples game, just this card game. And so it
What's it
starts at
called?
like this, it's uh, I think it's called, gosh, I forgot.
You can find it later. We'll link to it
Yeah,
because, yeah,
I'll
I
let you
think
know.
this
Yeah.
little prompts like this are
It's a
amazing.
great, yeah. So they have a basic game for like friends, family, everything like that. But they have a couples box, and it's a red box. I bought it at Target, of course, because I love Target. And like the first row of cards is perception. So it's just like, what's your perception? And it asks you all these different questions. And then the second level goes a little bit deeper. And then the third level goes really deep. And it's like asking these like really thought-provoking questions that you want to ask your partner, but you would never think of. And then you always think that they're probably going to give you some bullshit answer because you're like, oh, I don't believe you. You know, like, oh, do I look nice today? And oh yeah, you look great. I don't believe you. So uh so it's really nice because it just goes down this path of getting deeper with each other and building on that communication. Like, but the we just played it the other night, and the first card was like, draw a picture of the other person. And it was awful, but it was so funny and we laughed so hard. And then ask these great questions. And we only did 2 rounds of each card, and it took us 30 minutes. And by the end, we felt like we were so much more connected. And then we played Monopoly, and Randy totally murdered me in all the investments, and it was awful.
I love this because I think everyone listening can empathize with the being fried. Because if you put effort into your day and work and kids and life by 5 p.m., sometimes you have nothing left. So like sometimes
Mhm.
I can't think of a prompt, and I would
Yeah,
need a card to just be like, oh yeah, like let's talk about this, or like let me ask
yeah,
this, because there's times at the end of the day where you're like, I can't even think of a question to ask because I'm like,
exactly.
I've
Or I
put
don't
in my
even
all
want
in.
to.
I don't even want to. Yeah, I don't want to.
Yeah, I just want to be here in silence. Yeah, and we have to designate those times. We
Yeah.
really do. Yeah. And a calendar has helped so much. We used to just kind of fly by the seat of our pants and
Mhm.
forget things, but now if it's on the calendar, it's actually happening, and that's just really helped us focus and really stay true to what we plan for our family, for us, and for work. So that's helped.
Well, Shante, this went by way too fast. I think
Oh,
you're an absolute star in this industry. If there are women watching that want to get in touch or network or have questions,
yeah.
what's the best way to get a hold of you?
So I never check my personal email. But you can always email me at Shante@LambertHomeInspections.com. It's Shante.
Mhm.
And then that's probably the best way, I want to say. Send me an email and I'd love to chat.
Yeah, I think it's a small world of I think power women that are powering some of these businesses in this industry, and it
Yeah.
can be lonely. Like, it's
Mhm.
easy to acknowledge it can be a lonely industry in general, but I want to make sure people
Yeah.
know that just how much you've given, I think, just in general to the business, but then now in IEB, and just how much of a well-liked person you are in Spectora land. You
Oh,
get
well, thank you.
you get talked about more than we let you know about here. So
Oh.
that's a testament to how great of a person you are and just how much light you bring. So thank you.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me. It was great.
Awesome. All right.
Yeah.
Well, take care, and we'll talk real soon.
All right. Thanks.
All right.